And bad morning, everybody. Today is October 12th, 2018, and this is episode 60 of Bad Morning News. Thanks for joining us this morning for all the negative news that's apparently not fit to print by the mainstream corporate media who isn't interested in anyone knowing anything of value or substance. Bad morning, Danielle. Bad morning to you. Um, See some housekeeping. Thanks to our sponsor, Brave Browser. If you're tired of the major corporations selling your data to the highest bidder, give Brave Browser a try. Thanks to them for supporting the show. If you go to brave.com/bad944, and if you download the browser via that link, it benefits the show. So thanks to anyone considering doing that. And I'll drop that link following the show as well. And just a couple housekeeping notes. We are also looking for other co hosts for the show, either for the morning or afternoon, potentially. So give us a shout out if you're interested in potentially being a co host for the show. Get a hold of us in Discord or in the comments somewhere and let us know. Otherwise, thank you to Brave Browser again, and we also have a Patreon as well. Thanks to anyone considering that, but in any case, thanks for being here. And we'll get right to some articles. I'm definitely going to hit the major breaking news from yesterday of the Facebook and Twitter purge affecting apparently over 100 pages. Um, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, I wanted to hit up some community links. Today's Friday. That means we will cover any links anybody wants us to cover on Fridays within the Discord community. And this one is suggested by Danielle Hatfield. Thank you for your suggestion. This is from campusreform.org, written by Zachary Petrizzo. SDSU changes policy on suspect race descriptions. San Diego State University issued a new policy saying that police officers cannot release suspect race descriptions without enough identifiable information. San Diego State University informed students on Monday about a policy that will forbid its police department from using the race of crime suspects unless there is enough identifiable information for descriptions sent through the university alert system. This change is one of three in the policy titled San Diego State University Community Safety Notification Suspect Description Reporting Policy. SDSU alerted students of the updates in an email sent by SDSU Chief of Police Josh Mays and SDSU Associate Vice President for Faculty Diversity and Inclusion Luke Wood, which Campus Reform obtained. For the last several years, there have been ongoing conversations about the ways that university crime alerts may portray certain communities in a criminalized fashion. Mays and Wood said, in particular, concerns have been expressed by faculty, staff, and students about vague warnings that do not provide an extensive description of suspects. Mays and Wood explained that when SDSU police released a description of suspects reading tall, thin, black male adults in their early 20s wearing hooded sweatshirts, faculty and staff members complained that the description was too vague. The race of the suspect will not be released unless there is enough identifiable information to distinguish the suspect from our students, faculty, and staff of color. The two administrators continued. Students of color make up 53% of SDSU's student body, according to the university. The SDSU police chief and associate vice president for faculty diversity also noted that the school would withhold text message notifications pertaining to suspects if only the race and gender are known. Mays and Wood announced a third and final change to the policy, which would entail analysis of the policy with regard to the Clery Act, which requires that schools receiving federal financial aid keep campus crime data and security details, as well as make this information transparent. The California school administrators said this investigation would lend the institution insight into whether or not the campus culture promoted both the physical and emotional safety of all members of the SDSU campus community. SDSU junior Alex Mazzara expressed discontent with the policies when speaking with Campus Reform. These types of policies actually make communities less safe. It is not racist to accurately describe a wanted criminal suspect during an investigation. Sadly, our school has decided otherwise, Mazzara told Campus Reform. On another note, I was very troubled to see the clear inconsistency from the school regarding the disclosure of the race of suspects. According to the new policy, the race of the suspect will not be released unless there is enough identifiable information to distinguish the suspect from our students, faculty, and staff. The student said, staff of color, the student said, notice the last two words of color. Apparently, if there is a white suspect, they will have no problem disclosing race, as this would clearly distinguish the suspect from people of color on campus. This is completely hypocritical and discriminatory, as they are treating people differently based on the color of their skin, Mazzara said. SDSU College Republicans President Madison Marks Noble told Campus Reform she thought that the university's email was trying to be politically correct at the cost of our safety. Campus Reform reached out to SDSU, the school's police department, and the CIA for comment on the policy changes, but received no comment in time for press. The FBI declined to comment. Yeah, this is definitely a case of just useless political correctness, and as it says, if it's treating people differently based on the color of their skin. So, according to that, only if it's a person of color is a suspect, then they won't say that. But if the suspect is white, then I guess they would be okay saying that, which seems to undercut the entire thing that they claim to be concerned about, which is distinguishing suspects from anyone who potentially is just a person on campus, a student, or a member of their staff. I guess they don't care if a white student or member of staff gets confused for a suspect, but they only are concerned if it's a student of color, which is just ridiculous on its face to be uneven. If you're going to, I mean, I get, the idea of not wanting to have just broad generalizations, but if you're going to do that, then it should include white students as well. I mean, to me, the big problem is that cops are usually not very helpful, and in a lot of cases where if there are suspects with a vague description of any kind, they're just not useful, and the statistics on police solving cases is abhorrent in general. So I understand that side of it, but again, it's the unevenness and unfairness of it, and just the hypocrisy that's really telling here. And I'll just say as a side note, I'm glad I didn't end up going to SDSU. I went there on a school trip as a kid in, I believe, seventh grade. Uh, they take all like the seventh graders on a field trip to SDSU. I lived in the San Diego area at the time, and apparently some of the school districts will just ship all the kids over there and try to show them how great college is and get them to think about going there and promote it in that sense. And I can see why, if they're needing to try and get seventh graders to commit to go in there, maybe it's because of their garbage policies. I don't know. So, all right, I'll hit up another article from Community Links, also from Danielle. This is an interesting one from WashingtonTimes.com, written by Christopher Bodine, the AP. China says accusations against alleged spy out of thin air. Beijing, China. China said Thursday that accusations against an alleged Chinese spy accused of attempting to steal trade secrets from American aviation and aerospace companies were made out of thin air. Yan Junzhu, an operative of China's Ministry of State Security, was charged Wednesday in Cincinnati, Ohio, after being extradited to the U.S. from Belgium. Foreign Ministry spokesman Liu Kang dismissed the allegations and called on the U.S. to deal with the matter fairly in accordance with law and ensure Zhu's legitimate rights and interests. The U.S. accusation is something made out of thin air, Liu told reporters at a daily news briefing. The Justice Department has accused Zhu of recruiting experts from major aerospace companies, including GE Aviation, and persuading them to travel to China under the guise that they would give a presentation at a university. The trips were actually attempts to obtain secrets, according to the allegations. The indictment said Zhu recruited a GE Aviation employee who sent him a presentation in February that contained the company's proprietary information. Zhu later asked the employee for specific technical information and then asked him to meet in Europe, where he wanted the worker to provide additional information from GE, according to court papers. Zhu was arrested after traveling to Belgium in April. U.S. federal authorities said it is the first time that a Chinese Ministry of State Security intelligence officer has been extradited to the United States for trial. John Demers, the Assistant Attorney General in charge of national security, said the case was a significant economic espionage matter and the latest proof China is trying to steal information from American companies. Benjamin Glassman, U.S. Attorney for Ohio's Southern District, said no military information was targeted, but any attempt by other countries to grow companies at America's expense is considered a threat to national security. The case comes amid a brewing trade war sparked largely by U.S. accusations China coerces foreign companies into handing over technology in return for access to the Chinese market. The two have also feuded over U.S. support for Taiwan, Chinese weapons purchases from Russia, and China's territorial claims in the South China Sea, where the U.S. says a Chinese destroyer came aggressively close to a U.S. Navy ship late last month, forcing it to maneuver to prevent a collision. U.S. Pence also charged last week in a strongly worded speech that China was seeking through covert and overt means to interfere in the U.S. midterm elections and counter President Trump's tough trade policies toward Beijing. Trump has made similar accusations, although intelligence and Homeland Security experts said they didn't know of any Chinese influence operations akin to Russian activities during the 2016 presidential election. Alright, so this to me sounds kind of like more reality TV stuff. Just always this constant back and forth accusations of China doing this, US doing that. Who knows? I mean, who knows what the truth is at this point? I have no idea, to be honest with you. I don't know if this is something that China is really trying to do. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising per se, but also, there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides of provocation and whatnot. With, of course, knowing Trump has enacted a lot of sanctions, or not sanctions, I'm sorry, kind of starting this trade war with his tariffs, which is driving up costs of certain goods in the U.S. and then trying to offset that with more government action. It's definitely not good for anyone who wants cheap product. Um, a lot of people are upset over loss of U.S. jobs, but the reality is that if companies were forced to do all the manufacturing in the U.S., prices would go up. So if people are willing to do that, then I guess that's up to them. They're willing to pay more for things that were cheaper before all the trade tariffs and such. Um, that's what is going to happen as a result of this kind of trade war. And also, I always enjoy hearing these comments from the U.S. military saying that a Chinese destroyer came aggressively close to a U.S. Navy ship. Well, I can guarantee the Navy ship was probably somewhere it does not have any business being, probably right off China's coast. And to complain about Chinese ships being there is ridiculous. Um, we never see Chinese ships off the U.S. coast uh, complaining that they're being aggressively confronted because there aren't any Chinese ships off the U.S. coast. And they have a right to be in their own, proximity. I wonder uh, what would happen if they were off the coast. They would probably be summarily executed if they were as close to the U.S. coast as U.S. warships are constantly off of Chinese China's coast. In any event, I will check out the comments here. Daniel says you would think that the race of a criminal in a description would be a significant identifier, but hey, yeah, exactly. It does make a difference. So the idea of just excluding it because they think they're preserving some kind of political correctness is really ridiculous. And Daniel says, because we have no reason to suspect China of bad intent. Right, sure. Yeah, and as I said, I mean, I'm not saying China's, innocent in any case, but, I don't even know what is going on. It's a mess to me. Just going on for the ride. I mean, those of us who just want to live our lives are just kind of caught in between. And the same goes for just people in China. I mean, we don't really have a say in what our governments choose to do at this point, and it's just really ridiculous. Um, yeah, at this point, I definitely want to get into this Facebook purge. It's been talked about a lot since it happened yesterday, right in the middle of the day. And I have a couple articles of some people commenting on it and really breaking it down well. This first one is from Bad Morning News founder Jeremiah Harding. Well wishes to him, and he wrote up a good page on Steemit.com on his page. Insanity is free on Steemit, breaking down this Facebook purge. And I'll read a lot of what he wrote since he put it in really great terms. Breaking massive Facebook censorship ahead of midterms, hundreds of pages unpublished. In a follow-up to my piece yesterday about how Facebook lied me into a 3-day suspension for hate speech I committed none of, government supporters, Facebook's protected class, Facebook has decided to do even more to prove me right about this by censoring all the most prominent anti-government pages in an instant. I shared my post yesterday with 100 friends I tagged and my close to 5,000 friends, and about 20 minutes ago, as of writing this paragraph, one of those I tagged, Luke Ensor, links a post by another friend and longtime ally to Liberty, Michael Heise, with screenshots from multiple others detailing that years worth of work building anti-establishment audiences on Facebook had simply been unpublished in one fell swoop. Police the Police, Police the Police, New York, Cop Logic, Rachel Blevins, Gun Laws Don't Work, The Liberty Principle, Policing the Police, Legalizing Cannabis, Get Involved, You Live Here, Fuck the Government, Filming Cops, New School, Raphael 1, Voluntarist Veterans, Anonymous News, End the War on Drugs and Hemp were all silenced at once. Also, Psychologic Anarchist V is for voluntary and the anti-media and more. Now, if you buy the mainstream lies from outlets like USA Today, this is simply an anti-spam effort. Eli Blumenthal writes in his piece, Facebook removes over 550 pages, 250 accounts in latest spam purge ahead of US midterms. Facebook's fight against fake accounts and spam continued Thursday as the social networking giant removed 559 Facebook pages and 251 Facebook accounts over breaking the site's rules for, quote, spam and coordinated inauthentic behavior. Many were using fake accounts or multiple accounts with the same names and posted massive amounts of content across a network of groups and pages to drive traffic to their websites, wrote Nathaniel Gleicher, Facebook's head of cybersecurity policy, and Oscar Rodriguez, a Facebook product manager, in a blog post announcing the latest purge. Many used the same techniques to make their content appear more popular on Facebook than it really was. Others were ad farms using Facebook to mislead people into thinking that they were forums for legitimate political debate. Now, anyone who has followed these pages for a while and who doesn't have a pro-government, pro-corporation chip on their shoulder would be more than willing to say that these libertarian and anarchist pages were censored, not removed for spam. These pages violated no existing policies, and Facebook is lying in order to claim otherwise. In Nathaniel Gleicher's post, he primes readers for his lies by saying, quote, people need to be able to trust the connections they make on Facebook. It's why we have a policy banning coordinated inauthentic behavior, networks of accounts or pages working to mislead others about who they are and what they're doing. These pages weren't lying, however. They've been upfront and honest about what they want, and their goals are noble. He and Facebook, by extension, then keep the official lies going by calling these sites ad farms who were lying about legitimate content production. In this case, that legitimate content production would be towing the establishment line, because the only thing which separates their content from USA Today is that USA Today is too chicken shit to piss off corporate advertisers by telling the truth about them and the government that supports them. I know the people who run these pages and how these pages were run, and Facebook is lying about their reasons for doing this because the reasons they've given flatly don't apply. This is censorship, and censorship is gaining popularity among the Silicon Valley elite. In the latest of a long line of leaked Google internal memos, they make no bones about calling the free speech the internet could be home to a foundation of utopian principles. The document also holds up the Arab Spring as a positive example of what the internet can do, while taking shots at coverage of prominent police brutality cases, such as that of Philando Castile, gunned down for reaching for his wallet during a traffic stop, and Mike Brown, who witnesses still maintain was not a threat to the officer who shot him. The doc also compares those to Logan Paul's Suicide Forest, alt-right and Islamic extremism, Trump support, and the Peppa Pig meme, hailing all of these things and more as a marker for necessary censorship, or what they call being the good censor. They claim that hate speech, reprisals, and intimidation, trolling, cyber harassment, cyber racism, and venting are all reasons for censoring content, and quote, people who think anything less is utopian, with many sections condescendingly finger wagging at users, simply claiming they're behaving badly. Same with tech firms and governments, but to a much lower degree, and only to then go on claiming that all tech company censorship is at least somewhat directly comparable to the takedown of the Daily Stormer and YouTube taking down channels that exploited child actors. It goes on to give people standards that really amount to nothing more than platitudes like don't take sides and explain the tech, but this is all a thin veneer over the truth. Platforms want to crack down to keep ads going, and if you aren't siding with the guys paying their bills, you'll be ejected. This document sides with corporations over people, making amusing internet content, and compares that to fighting Nazis. The framing is apparent. They don't care about hate, they don't care if what you're doing is against policy or not, and if they don't like it, it won't be on their platform long, even if they have to outright lie about the reasons to shut you up. And this is just Google, who's been leaked, but if you think Facebook is any better, remember they have the same models of data collection and for similar reasons and seem unified in their efforts to block dissent. Pretty convenient this happens this close to midterms, eh? So be careful out there, you could be next, and there may be nothing you could do about being wiped from the public record, according to mainstream networks. The Matrix, 1984, and Brave New World are appetizer platters for the elites to pick and choose from when choosing how you should be monitored, controlled, censored, and this isn't even the first course. So that's the end of Jeremiah's article, or his write-up on Steemit. Pretty much gets to the core of it. All these pages were taken down, and Facebook is claiming they were spamming, um, just because some of them have similar names and such, and use that as an excuse to take them all down. And that includes some of the sites that I really enjoy, and I get a lot of uh, articles from, like the Free Thought Project and Anti-Media, among others. I believe Activist Post may also have had their page taken down. So, it's just really convenient that all of these sites that call into question a lot of government actions are all of a sudden being taken down, and Facebook using a thinly veiled excuse to take them down. And I actually have another article that touches on this, linking it to Twitter, also kind of purging the same people. This comes from Medium.com, written by Caitlin Johnstone. Facebook, Twitter purge, more dissident media pages in latest escalation. Let's see. Facebook has purged more dissident political media pages today, this time under the pretense of protecting its users from inauthentic activity. In a statement co-authored by Facebook head of cybersecurity Nathaniel Gleicher, who also happens to be the former White House National Security Council Director of Cybersecurity Policy, the massive social media platform explained that it has removed 559 pages and 251 accounts that have consistently broken our rules against spam and coordinated inauthentic behavior. And let's see, moving down in the article. For those of you who read what I write, you know that I did not violate any standards, writes Teresa Monroe Hamilton, whose personal profile and Facebook page for her political blog, noisyroom.net, were both deleted. In fact, I don't send out most of what I write. I send on big news links and a few memes. It was enough to get me banned, and the pages are simply gone. Facebook took down my page with nearly 70,000 followers, labeling it spam when I have spent 4 years working to build that page up and using it to post the articles I wrote and videos of my reporting, tweeted RT America's Rachel Blevins. This is so incredibly wrong and is affecting hundreds of similar pages. And just like that, 5+ years of hard work promoting ideas of peace and freedom have been erased, wrote a Facebook user called John Liberty, who lost multiple pages about police accountability, cannabis legalization, and libertarianism. Two of the most high-profile pages, which were shut down, have probably been seen at some point by any political dissident who uses Facebook. The Free Thought Project, which had 3.1 million followers, and Anti-Media, which had 2.1 million. I've found useful information on both sites before, and despite disagreeing with them ideologically in some areas, have found them both vastly more legitimate than anything you'll find on Google News. As if that wasn't creepy enough, some of the accounts purged by Facebook appear to be getting censored on Twitter as well, bringing back memories of the August cross-platform coordinated silencing of Alex Jones. The aforementioned Anti-Media has now been suspended from Twitter just hours after tweeting about being removed from Facebook, along with one of its top writers, Kiri Wedler, and a Unicorn Riot activist named Patty Beers, who had more than 30,000 Twitter followers, has just been removed from both sites as well. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, in a corporatist system wherein there is no clear line between corporate power and government power, corporate censorship is government censorship. You can't have a system wherein corporate lobbying and campaign finance amount to bribery of elected officials, wherein massive Silicon Valley corporations form extensive ties with secretive government agencies in order to eclipse their competition, and then claim this is a matter of private corporations enforcing their own rules on their own private property. This is just what totalitarian government censorship looks like in a corporatist oligarchy. And there's more she writes here, but that's the gist of it. As I said, a lot of people talking about this right now, where again, it's not just Facebook, but also Twitter now, deciding to summarily remove certain accounts for certain sites that publish articles and content that runs counter to a lot of what the mainstream media would like to be prominent out there. And of course, to them, they never seem concerned about any lies or misleading by all the major newspapers and the old legacy media, with them putting out all kinds of propaganda pieces from government sources, the FBI, CIA, and such. They never seem to care about their misleading and their actions, but suddenly, if any, they always have some excuse to take down alternative media sites. So, this is just something to always keep at the forefront and make sure everyone knows that they're not to be trusted at this point. Anyone who thinks Facebook is trustworthy and safeguarding any type of standard in reporting or anything is just terribly misguided. But yeah, I'm glad I am not on Facebook. I'm sure I probably would have been shadow banned a long time ago if I was there. I know a lot of people are still on there, and it is a good way to get your message out, but it's always a double-edged sword because they certainly seem willing to take down anyone's content at any time when they decide they don't like you anymore and they don't want you to have a voice. Danielle says, so glad I'm not on Facebook. I don't see much of a way around some sort of regulation to keep Facebook from First Amendment censorship. And Danielle says, yes, Twitter too. I ditched that site months ago. Yeah, yeah. As the writer of this Medium article says, they're at a point where it is government censorship. It's not just some private business doing what they want. They use the government to have monopoly over social media and the public sphere in this sense, and they've just totally taken over the narrative. And unfortunately, um, they are acting as a government censor in this case. And I really don't know what the solution is because uh, I think maybe the government will be forced by public pressure to do something in terms of rolling back its more overt censorship. But in the end, since they're in bed together, the government and these mega tech corporations are working for each other. So it's in their interest to continue doing what they're doing and not be fair and balanced in any sense. So I wouldn't hold out much hope for the government doing anything meaningful in terms of stopping all of this purging and censorship. And as I've talked about a lot recently, and others are talking about, it's definitely time to try and move to other platforms, and that's difficult in its own right, but it needs to be done at this point since we cannot trust any of these major sites. But yeah, definitely let me know if you guys have had good experiences with some of these new alternative sites. I know there's a lot out there, um, but if you know of any that you think work particularly well, definitely let us know. Let others know. Twitter, I still use Twitter, but I know it's really garbage at this point. And Jack, the Jack guy, whoever he is, the guy who runs Twitter, has admitted that they're left leaning, which shouldn't surprise anyone. But anytime any of these Silicon Valley types are biased at the very least, if not overtly trying to uh, shape and control public opinion, just the fact that they're left leaning in itself would make me suspicious of anything they do and would make me feel like I couldn't expect to be totally free in my expression, knowing that they have their own standards of political correctness and what they deem unacceptable and what they claim is hate speech nowadays. Daniel says Jack Dorsey. Yeah, that's the Twitter guy's name, Jack Dorsey. All right, this next article is from a let's see. Yeah, this next article is from the local news site here where I live in Western Washington State from king5.com, king5news.com. Washington Supreme Court tosses out state's death penalty. Washington State Supreme Court has ruled the death penalty violates its constitution. The ruling Thursday makes Washington the 20th state to do away with capital punishment by legislative act or court decree. The justices said the death penalty is invalid because it is imposed in an arbitrary and racially biased manner. They ordered that people currently on death row have their sentences converted to death penalty equally apply where the crime took place or the county of residence or the available budgetary resources at any given point in time or the race of the defendant. Chief Justice Mary Fairhurst wrote in the lead opinion. She added, "Our capital punishment law lacks fundamental fairness. Defense lawyers had long challenged the death penalty on those grounds, noting the state's worst mass murderers and serial killers, Green River Killer Gary Ridgway among them, had received life terms, not death. In a 5-4 ruling in 2006, the justices rejected an argument from a death row inmate that he shouldn't be executed because Ridgway hadn't been executed. This time, death penalty critics were armed with more data about how capital punishment works, including a statistical analysis by University of Washington sociologists. Their report showed that although prosecutors were not more likely to seek the execution of black defendants, juries were about 4 times more likely to sentence black defendants to death. Now the information is plainly before us. Fairhurst wrote, "To the extent that race distinguishes the cases, it is clearly impermissible and unconstitutional." Governor Jay Inslee, a one-time supporter of capital punishment, had previously said no executions will take place while he's in office and put a moratorium on the death penalty. Today's decision by the state Supreme Court thankfully ends the death penalty in Washington. Governor Inslee tweeted, "This is a hugely important moment in our pursuit for equal and fair application of justice." The ruling was in the case of Alan Eugene Gregory, who was convicted of raping, robbing, and killing Jeannie Harshfield, a 43-year-old woman, in 1996. His lawyers, Neil Fox and Leila Silverstein, said the death penalty is arbitrarily applied and that it is not applied proportionally as state constitution requires. However one feels about the propriety of capital punishment, in theory, in practice, the death penalty is imposed in an unfair, arbitrary, and racially biased manner, Silverstein said in a written statement. The Supreme Court properly ruled the Washington Constitution does not tolerate such an unfair system. Dozens of former state judges took the unusual step of urging the court to use Gregory's case to strike down capital punishment. Among them was former Justice Faith Ireland, who sided with the narrow majority in upholding capital punishment in 2006. Excuse me. In Thursday's decision, the court did not rule out the possibility that the legislature could come up with another manner of imposing death sentences. "We leave open the possibility that the legislature may enact a carefully drafted statute to impose capital punishment in this state, but it cannot create a system that offends constitutional rights," the opinion said. Attorney General Bob Ferguson said he would press the legislature to make the sole punishment for aggravated murder life in prison without release. Opponents of the death penalty have fought to abolish it for years. In July, Ferguson met with legislative leaders to discuss a survey of more than 600 voters, which found that nearly 70% preferred an alternative to the death penalty. Of those, 46% chose life in prison with no possibility of parole, on requirement to work in prison and pay restitution to the victims as a punishment. State lawmakers pursued abolishing the death penalty and came close early this year. There is a profound shift in our state and country that the death penalty is below us as a civil, just, and moral society, Democratic Senator Reuven Carlyle, who had been a sponsor of those previous attempts, said in a text message. Not everyone agrees, however. Families of victims say they won't see justice served. Lee Payton, the mother of Jeannie Harshfield, said Gregory doesn't deserve to live. She called the justices a bunch of dummies who cannot relate to what she has had to live with. "He's a thoroughly evil man," said Payton. So I saw this article came out yesterday, and as it said, this is the 20th state, I guess, to now, at least currently, not have the death penalty in use by the state. And I think it's interesting that the reason given in the article that was present in that case, in the particular case that they ruled on that struck down the death penalty in Washington state, is it only talks about applying it fairly and that type of thing. It mentions, that's imposed unfairly and in a racially biased way. I mean, to me, you don't even need to go into the whole, black people are more likely to get executed. I think the idea of putting anything in the government's hands that significant is just really foolish. I mean, obviously, from my perspective, I don't think government is good at doing anything, so of all things, why give them the power to kill people? To legitimately say, okay, we're putting you to death, and, like I said, that's aside from all the emotion involved. I'm not saying those people who committed these crimes deserve to live or deserve to die or whatever, but I mean, if nothing else, I would never find it palatable that a government agency would be in the position to carry out such a thing. That's the absolute last thing I would want them to have any power over. If their inability to do anything else under their purview is any indication, it's just a fool's errand to entrust this to them. So, in that sense, I actually find that good news. It's bad news for, I guess, government authority. Um, and like I said, I'd prefer to see the rationale given just being that the government isn't reliable to make such a decision, as they're not in so many cases, but this particular case just focused on kind of the ideas of it being imposed unfairly on certain groups rather than others. And I will check comments here. Sorry about this background noise. Daniel says, I have to say that I find death sentences rather hypocritical. I agree. I agree. I mean, there's always people who will say, eye for an eye, that type of thing. If they killed someone, they should be killed. Personally, I've moved away from that type of view. I'm not, a pacifist or, bleeding heart or whatever, but I just don't see the value in being, um, in just seeking vengeance. I mean, that's what it comes down to me, is people just wanting to have vengeance and be able to say, this person's dead now. I don't see that as really valuable. And then if you add in just, again, another thing that wasn't mentioned, the cost of putting people on death row. I mean, that all of those resources would be better off just given to the families of victims. I mean, I would think they would make more use of money than having people go through decades and decades of court appeals and new trials, and then being potentially just executed by the state. Um, I think restitution is certainly preferable to just having the idea of vengeance and bloodlust. But yeah, this is something that's hopefully gonna gain more traction in other states around the country. I personally have followed this for years, and in my view, it seems like this issue has really faded from the public sphere. I remember back in like 2000, 2004, in those elections, it being mentioned more prominently as a campaign issue. But ever since then, I really haven't heard it come up very much. And I'm not sure what the exact reasons are behind that. Um, yeah, since like the mid 2000s on, it just seems to have disappeared. Um, as an issue, even in campaigns and presidential elections and such. At least at the national level, I guess. Hopefully, at the state level, it's more talked about prominently, as is what happened in this case. All right, another article here. This one is from the Free Thought Project. One of my favorite sites, one of the sites that was purged from Facebook yesterday. This is written by the team at Free Thought. In blow to cancer victim, judge may overturn his 50 million Monsanto Roundup verdict. In a tentative ruling, a San Francisco judge announced she was ready to order a new trial in a $289 million judgment against agribusiness giant. A California judge signaled Wednesday she'd overturn a $250 million punitive damages award against Monsanto, finding the agrochemical company knew its popular Roundup weed killer causes cancer, but deliberately failed to tell a school groundskeeper dying of lymphoma. Superior Court Judge Suzanne Ramos Bolanos appeared skeptical in an afternoon hearing that there was sufficient evidence Monsanto acted with oppression or malice by not warning groundskeeper Dwayne Johnson of the risks of spraying Roundup, a requirement for awarding punitive damages. Becoming increasingly frustrated with arguments by Johnson's trial team, including one by Baum Hedlund, Aristide Goldman attorney Brent Weisner rejecting blame for purportedly manipulating the jury into awarding punitive damages, Bolanos indicated she planned to affirm a tentative ruling issued before the hearing vacating the punitive damages award based on insufficient evidence. In the written ruling, Bolanos said she would grant Bayer-owned Monsanto a new trial on punitive damages if she were to ultimately deny the company's motion to vacate the punitive damages award. Bayer agrees with the court's tentative ruling. Bayer said in an emailed statement, the jury's verdict was wholly at odds with over 40 years of real-world use, an extensive body of scientific data and analysis, including in-depth reviews by regulatory authorities in the US and EU, and approvals in 160 countries, which support the conclusion that glyphosate-based herbicides are safe when used as directed and that glyphosate is not carcinogenic. Although US and European regulators have concluded Roundup's active ingredient glyphosate is safe, the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer classified it in 2015 as a probable human carcinogen, triggering thousands of lawsuits against Monsanto in the United States, including Johnson's. His lawyers argued during a 4-week trial this past summer Monsanto knew for decades Roundup is carcinogenic, but didn't include a cancer warning label with the product or instruct users to wear protective clothing when spraying it for fear of disrupting its multi-billion-dollar global business. Monsanto countered Roundup was safe. It argued the herbicide could not have caused Johnson's illness because cancer takes about 3 years to develop, and Johnson used Roundup for just one summer for his job as a school groundskeeper in Benicia before developing symptoms the following fall. Nonetheless, a unanimous 12-person jury found for Johnson in August, awarding him $289 million in damages, including $33 million for reduced life expectancy. Bolanos is considering reducing the $33 million award to about $9 million. Shortly after, Monsanto moved to overturn the verdict, order a new trial, or reduce damages. The company accused Weisner, who headed Johnson's trial team, of prejudicing the jury into finding for Johnson, despite a purported lack of scientific evidence Roundup caused his cancer. At trial, Wisner compared Monsanto with tobacco companies, imploring the jury to change the world by awarding punitive damages to deter future unethical conduct, and asked them to visualize unscrupulous Monsanto executives toasting a verdict in their favor with glasses of champagne. The message sent to the jury was, "You can look beyond this courtroom, George Lombardi, Monsanto's attorney with Winston and Strawn, told Bolanos Wednesday. Lombardi was referring to the requirement juries only consider evidence tied to a plaintiff when awarding punitive damages." All right, so there's a little more to this article. Basically, Monsanto's attorneys complain about some of the tactics used by the plaintiff's attorneys, um, but really, I find it pretty sad. It mentions there where it says, oh, there's been 40 years of use. Well, I think Monsanto and Bayer have been covering shit up for 40 years. And there's a lot of information out there from really knowledgeable people who know a lot about this subject. And I encourage everyone to investigate it for yourself. I think there's a lot of evidence out there that Monsanto has caused a lot of harm uh, to people in this country with their products, and including cancer and going far beyond that. I know some people personally who work in agriculture who've seen the effects of glyphosate and Roundup and all of these products created by Monsanto, and it definitely. I mean, let's just put it this way: this verdict would just be the tip of the iceberg if, um, based on a lot of the research out there showing that they have caused a lot of harm. And so, of course, this one win against Monsanto is potentially going to be overturned by this judge. I have to wonder if she's connected with Monsanto or being paid off in some way. You know, unfortunately, I guess that makes me a crazy conspiracy theorist, but unfortunately, that's the world we live in, where these mega corporations are in bed with other people in power, and they're able to pay off scientists and researchers to publish findings in their favor. And it's not surprising that they would have their own scientists presenting that they are posing no threat. But in any event, I encourage everyone to look into that on their own. But that would really suck for this particular guy in this lawsuit if his suit gets overturned, and I feel bad for him, and he's suffering right now. So good luck to that guy. And I'll check out the comments one more time here. In any case, we're about at the top of the hour, and I'll just mention again, we're looking for other co-hosts for Bad Morning News. If you are interested in that, let us know in the Discord or in the comments. And all the links from today's show will be posted in the description within a few minutes. And I would just like to thank you all for tuning in today and this week. And have a bad morning. Thanks everybody for being here. Today has been episode 60 of Bad Morning News for October 12th. And have a good weekend, everybody. But bad morning, and you keep in mind all the stories that are unfit to print by the mainstream media. And remember, screw the state, fuck the system. See you next week. Have a bad morning.